And I was like, whoa, like where is that big dream of working for the United Nations, the social impact part in my life?
Nezha Alaoui, who is a social impact innovator, women's empowerment advocate, author and influencer.
I figured out a long time ago that doing good to others is the best good you can do to yourself. So this concept of doing social impact, meaning that, okay, I have to wait until I become a billionaire like Bill Gates and then, like I will dedicate my life to give back, is wrong.
Talk to me about the struggles of women, because I'm a white guy in my 30s, like I don't have any of the things that people might perceive as these barriers.
And I know like people think that it's only happening in poor areas like Africa or like Middle East, but even women in Europe and in the US are struggling. I go to Harvard Business School every year to try to train myself in executive course. I get into a plane on like an early morning Monday, going into a business destination. Like I just look around and everyone is a man.
We're only hiring anyone other than white people and anyone other than men. What's your take on that?
Life is probabilities at the end of the day. It's opportunities are out there, but how much time are you investing in seeking those opportunities? It was really something that since the age of like 7, 8 years old, I always wanted to help the poor people. Because it's not enough, then I'm not going to do anything. That is so wrong. What's amazing is that in the poorest community, these people have a strength to give you back. That's the journey of life, is to take yourself out of your comfort zone.
Welcome to the show where we talk to successful people about the bits you don't see. Today, we're talking to Nezha Alaoui, who is a social impact innovator, women's empowerment advocate, author and influencer. Nezha, how are you doing?
Great, thank you.
So thank you for coming on today. I'm really excited to kind of have a conversation with you. Probably different to the people that I've already worked with. They're probably doing a lot of good for themselves. You seem to be doing a lot of good potentially for other people as well. So yeah, talk to me about your life. What have you got going on?
Yes, I mean, when you're talking about doing good to yourself versus doing good to others, I think I figured out a long time ago that doing good to others is the best good you can do to yourself as well. So I've built a life through my passion for social impact, where I focused on women's empowerment. For the past 15 years, I worked for the United Nations. That was a big dream for me as a child. And then once I achieved that, definitely it set me up to learn the expertise on how to measure impact, how to create impact. And but it also gave me a big confidence as a woman. It was my first big milestones. It was a childhood dream that I got to achieve, and then I realized that you can achieve your dreams if you do set yourself, first of all, the right mindset for it, the right attitude, and then work hard for it.
So this is a great conversation for me because I'm literally working with my life coach just now, moving from doing good for me to doing good for others. And it's not one that I've really, I've not quite figured out yet. So talk to me in a little bit more depth about what it's like helping other people.
So when we talk about leadership or success, it's a lot sometimes related, over the years it got lost, and we think that a leader is a CEO or like a high-level executive or like a founder.
That's what I am just now.
Exactly. When in reality, for me, a leader is someone who leads others in the right direction. So obviously, leadership doesn't go without inspiring others and doing good to others, and it goes hand in hand with that. So on your question on how to create social impact, I really think everyone can do it. I think a lot of people think that they need to be billionaires to give back. A lot of people think that they can't change the world on their own, and you need to overcome these two ideas, which are wrong.
And let's zoom right in then. What do you actually do? Who's benefiting? How? What's going on?
So what I do, and I have a team as well that I've developed over the years, we run programs, we develop programs that impact women, women's economic development. So it goes from low-income women in Africa to women executives in corporations. And when I started as a social entrepreneur, because that's what I call myself, I am an entrepreneur. I'm generating revenues, but also I have the social impact as a strong KPI to measure my success. And so when I started as a social entrepreneur, at that time, like, people had like big goals of, okay, I need to raise $2 million to develop a project that is going to impact, I don't know, 10,000 kids or 10,000 women. And I had those projects, but they take sometimes a year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, like to succeed. But I always said, okay, I have those big projects. I'm going to have middle-sized project, and I'm going to have super small projects as well. Okay. If I have $5,000, what can I do with it? And that is very important, because if you're just like aiming for the big project that takes a couple of years, then you find yourself, of course, sitting on stage in conferences, podcasts, talking about that amazing big project, but you're not really doing anything on a day-to-day to do it. And then you find yourself like almost like as an imposter, like lying after like 1 year of saying I'm working on this project, but nothing tangible happening. And I never wanted to be that. So I wanted to stay close to the field. What my confidence also was to, while I'm pitching the big project, to feel that I am doing things on a day-to-day basis. And it's been like an amazing kind of like value that I imposed to myself, because I've been learning a lot through like being on the field and always staying close to the beneficiaries, these women that I want to help. What do they need? And as I'm helping them with small money, I'm learning a lot from them to know if I have big money, what I could be doing for them.
That makes sense. So that's something that I wanted to figure out, because you mentioned, you know, you do generate revenue at the same time, and that must help do it. Because I kind of, when I was looking, I was thinking, are we just getting money from thin air and making things happen, but it's actually generating revenue at the same time?
Yes.
So what sort of streams of revenue are generated?
Yes. So we sell these programs to corporate sponsors.
Right.
So that's how we get the revenues. Also, what you have to know is that even when you have a pure nonprofit, which I do have a nonprofit, and I have Women's Choice, which is an organization that is for profit, but it's fully focused on creating those programs. So even when you have a nonprofit, the ratio is you have 10% from the grants that you get that you use for like management fees. You pay yourself a salary with that, and you pay your team. So this concept of doing social impact, meaning that, okay, I have to wait until I become a billionaire like Bill Gates, and then, you know, like I will dedicate my life to give back, is wrong. You can actually, it can be your job. You can pay yourself a salary, or you can create it as a social enterprise, which is what I have with Women's Choice. And actually, you know, like even have dividends and profits and so on as you're scaling, just as any startup.
Yeah. So that makes so much sense, because if you need to get to a billionaire to become a philanthropist, there's 0.00001% of the population, whereas the way that you're doing it, 1% of the population, or maybe even more, could do it.
Totally.
And that is way more. So what is Women's Choice? You mentioned Women's Choice.
Yeah, so Women's Choice is what I run on a day-to-day basis. I launched it in New York. So we were based in New York, and we started working with corporations and building a community of women executive and entrepreneurs, and giving a value proposition to these women on giving them like trainings, like panel conversations, networking events, to keep giving them opportunities to develop their business and their career growth. And on another end, we have the B2B relationship to these corporations that will sponsor these activities on one option, or the other option also is we run specific programs for their women their women's network, their women employees. So so New York was a great school because obviously it's a very competitive one, and you're close to the headquarters of all these big companies, the Fortune 500 companies. And then in 2020, COVID hit, but also I got called here in the region to start doing some consultancy for the governments in Saudi and here in the region. And then I decided to move here, not just for the good weather and, like the tax benefits and so on, but also because I'm originally from Morocco, and part of the work I've done previously for the United Nations was in Africa, and I really wanted to impact this region, like Middle East, like the Arab world and Africa, because that's where my heart is.
So some might say that there's a contradiction between women's choice and women type stuff and this region. Typically in the West, it's kind of viewed upon that women are looked down on in this region. What's your experience of that?
No, so thank you for the question. Surprisingly, I'll tell you, I've worked with women and on these topics in the US, in Europe, Africa, and Middle East. And there are problematics everywhere. Like women in the US struggle a lot with a lot of discrimination, a lot of barriers that they have that can be very strong within the corporations. So and then in this region, it's like more like of an obvious glass ceiling that you think there is, because there is obviously like on a social level, a religious level or whatsoever. But then when you start working inside, you realize that there is space for women to grow, and there is like a real desire from the government levels, from the employment level, to find solutions that they ask us to find to how can we empower women in business and so on. But also those solutions need to bring solutions for them to grow their families, which is like a more logical, long-term, successful vision for women than actually trying to put them in a competitive space where, you almost have to keep pushing to your late 30s, 40s, like your motherhood. So the struggle is everywhere. And I know like people think that it's only happening in poor areas like Africa or like Middle East. But even women in Europe and in the US are struggling. But so I like the dynamic here. I like what is happening here.
Yeah. So I agree. I've not seen anything worse here than I've seen in the UK. I didn't want to give my perspective first. I wanted to get yours, but I completely agree with that. So, talk to me about the struggles of women, because I'm a white guy in my 30s. I don't have any of the things that people might perceive as these barriers.
Yes.
I've literally have everything that is the opposite of the barriers. Talk to me about the barriers.
Yes, so the barriers are a lot also based to a lack of self-confidence that is linked to like a generational input, on how they were raised, the content they have watched. When you look back at what we watched in the 80s in terms of Disney movies, where you had, you were that princess that never gets dirty, and you're the sleeping beauty, you sleep for 100 years until, the white Prince Charming comes and saves you. So there was, that type of content, and then you start playing with the dolls, and you're right away jumping into trying to mother a baby, zero also experiences into playing in a soccer team at the time, and the team concept, but also the concept of being successful, failing. All these things were, little girls were really isolated from that. So obviously when they grew up to be a woman, and it's just my generation, I'm 42, we're talking about my generation. Then you get into the business life and the corporate life, and a lot of these women are super introvert. They're more the type, even though they have amazing degrees and everything, but the minute, there is something to organize in the office, they'll jump out, like to be, like the organizers are bringing the coffee and like whatsoever, like setting up, like the place for others, not speaking up for themselves. And so that's the reality of the majority of the women from that generations. Now I have daughters that are 15 and 17, and I'm seeing already the change in the content that they've watched at their generation.
Better or worse?
Watch that the difference of like even the Disney movies that they watched, like you started having some characters of Wonder Woman,
Right.
Superwomen, that plays, like in the back, like of a child's mindset. So when we talked about the struggle, I told you about like the personal struggle and like the mental self-limiting beliefs that women can have. And then there is the system. That's another story.
Yeah.
The system has been created for 2,000 years by men, obviously for men. It's if all the creators, all the business leaders, all the government leaders, all the leaders at all levels are men and consortiums of men sitting and making decisions, they cannot potentially create a world that is not a world created by men for men. And women had to adapt to it all the way through. So the ones that are successful, and there are a lot of them, what they don't know is that they obviously had to put 10 times more effort to adapt to something that was not fit for them. And this is where we see some of like the struggles that just makes it that, yes, women get more resilient when they get successful because they had to go through more struggles. But at the same time, it makes it that they burn out much more easily. They just get discouraged at some point. Like I see a lot of brilliant women in the executive world that at places where they're like at the prime of their career, they just like, when they get to that career level where they've proven to themselves what they can do, they just get discouraged and step out, and they just say like, why do I have to do this? Like, I honestly, like at this stage, I still have, like to walk in a room and have, like to fight for my values, like with a bunch of guys. They're still, around the table. There are so many setups where you're going to walk in. I'm talking about the business setups where you're going to find yourself just like in an extreme minority. Sometimes you're the only woman around the table. And all this is obviously still part of the system, still discouraging. I do Harvard business. I go to Harvard Business School every year to try to train myself in an executive course. And the first time I get there in 2018, I got in late and I just walk into a room with 80 people where I'm like just seeing men. These were all like the participants. And then I sit down and I start counting the women, and we were like 8 women. So it was 10%. And you're getting into like those big institutions where you think, okay, obviously everything is solved in those places. And it's not. I get into a plane on like an early morning Monday, going into a business destination. And then, like I just look around and everyone is a man. And so, because you realize that just for a woman to show up in that executive course or to show up in that Monday morning, 5 a.m., like super competitive flight where everyone is going, like to get the money. Yeah. It takes her much more barriers to get there. She probably has, like kids at home and that she cannot leave. And she has like so many barriers that will stop her from being able to show up, like on that morning and be competitive.
So I understand the problem now, and it has helped me understand. What does perfect look like? What is the end goal? Where do we get to?
Yes, thank you. I mean, you have an amazing question because it's very important to understand that perfect doesn't mean a world, like where men 50, are put aside or whatsoever. Absolutely this is not the way I think, because I've been, as I said, on the field for the past 15 years and really trying to understand. And I call myself a social impact innovator because, there is an innovation piece. The same way there is innovation, like in technology, like what we need today is not what we needed 15 years ago. So don't think that in this space of ESG, corporate social responsibility, or women's empowerment, it's the same solution. That solution evolve, and you need to sometimes create like a program and then see the consequences of it, and then like innovate and like fine tune it, and make sure that it doesn't have the wrong impact on society. So the perfect society is a society where, economically speaking, women have as much opportunities to engage as men, because at the end of the day, it's half of the population. We're not talking about a minority. So it's good for countries, for GDP growth. It's good for household income, that both, like can generate incomes, because we live a continuous inflation that makes it that the schools and the lifestyle that we've had as kids and what our parents gave us, sometimes we cannot afford to give the same thing to our own kids because of the inflation. So economic participation, but then we really need to create two type of models and tracks, okay? One for men and one for women, knowing that women are the mothers of the next generation. I mean, they're the ones that will be pregnant for 9 months. They're the one that will pop a child out of, like their belly. Yeah. And they're the one that will, like be the first feeding source for a child. And you need to take that in account. And it creates also an emotional connection, to the child, that makes it that when the child is sick, he's seeking the presence and the attention of their mom. We talk about mother tongue. And this is really something that I've seen with my kids, where when they started talking, I would like hear them having some expressions, and I would be like, where did I hear that? Like, and in reality, it was my own expressions. But if you don't hear them, you don't realize that it's your own expression. And like really, children like pick up even, like the first learning from their mom. So we cannot just say that men and women like should be equal when it comes, like to parenting. There is, of course, like over the time, there is, that equal participation and complementary participation. It's not about equality, it's about complementing each other, but also understanding what is the reality of our, like life, and what is the reality of the life of a man, and how, like can we complete each other to be amazing leaders, and create working space that are much more compassionate, diverse, fulfilling for everyone.
So that makes sense. And it sounds maybe a lot more balanced than what some of the people that may be opposed to women kind of growing into stronger positions are. So I don't know if you've seen the media, particularly in the West, around about women getting put ahead of men in certain jobs, or black people getting put ahead of white people. And there's quite a lot of kind of opposition that's getting a bit more loud about it should at least be equal. What's your take on that?
So, at the beginning, I was very young, and when I first heard about the quotas, I was like, oh, like maybe we don't need the quotas, and like, equality means that it should be like meritocracy. But in reality, after, of course, building up my expertise, I quickly realized that quotas are very important at the beginning, because in reality, we're in a system that is just like producing an effect of like white young men being in position versus like black people or women. And to break that pattern, you need to intentionally create a space. And that's what the quota is. And it can look unfair because, like in that space, you don't have the just quality that comes in. But once you've created that space and then kind of like everyone gets in. So let's think, you know, like you created the space, then you have like women getting in, and some of them are not the most qualified, but then they get in, then you create that natural, you know, like competition within that space for the most qualified to stay in as women. But if you don't create that space, then there is like a very narrow space, and for like qualified women to get into that narrow space, it's also like unfair. So as I said, we need to look, when you're looking for a job and you are that white man and you're seeing that, okay, like it's tough right now, you also have to think of like that 2000 years and like, yes, the space is less right now than it was, you know, like few years ago, but also the space is still big, because few years ago the space was like much bigger, and now it seems that it has shrunk, but it's still big technically, because when you put those quotas, you really make sure to have women, because, you know, this is the strategy for the next 2 years. But at the same time, there is like a system as well, you know, like of peer-to-peer, you know, like where there is like another half of the space where, you know, like men will drag other men, you know, like into it and so on. But yes, I do understand, you know, like the feeling, for sometimes like men feeling that they're left out in this type of strategies. But when you look at the numbers, when you look at like really the reports, and technically they are not left out.
Still 95,
Yes, exactly. It's just, it's a strong impression. But I'm asking, you know, the men that are listening to us to really understand and get deeper into the data and understand that it's just an impression. And you do have, you know, like a seat at the table. You do have space to find your next job. You just have to, I mean, the world is getting more and more competitive, and we all need to be proactive in finding our, you know, like, seat at the table. And, but don't get discouraged because, you know, like you suddenly think that now, you know, like it's an era for women.
So one of the really big ones in the UK recently was one of the local police forces said, we are not hiring white men. We're only, I think, hiring black people and women, or anyone other than white people and anyone other than men. What's your take on that?
No, so of course, you know, like when it's put out like this publicly, it's kind of like shocking for the young man that just graduated and that is looking for a job. But at the same time, it's like the story of like sometimes in a company, they can have, you know, like a lot of coders, and like right now they're going to announce that we're not hiring any coders right now. We're hiring, you know, like another expertise that we need. And you've just graduated, you know, like from like a coding school or whatsoever, but you just need to get like very creative in understanding that the world is wide, and like don't just listen to the news. As an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, and I think everyone should be an intrapreneur, even when you're looking for a career in the executive world. Like, be that intrapreneur, meaning like that person that really is proactively creating their career path within that corporate world. And as an entrepreneur, I have really isolated myself to over like listening to media, because sometimes it can like really break your mood. And it's not everything that is announced publicly that is really, you know, like gonna get applied. And just like focus on what you can do in your day. Honestly, if you're listening to that and it's stopping you from applying on LinkedIn to 10, 20 jobs, then obviously what has been announced had an impact on you, where you proactively, you know, impacted your day with it. When just like not listening to that and actually choosing to do every day what you have to do to find a job, and it's the amount of hours, you know, life is probabilities at the end of the day. You know, it's opportunities are out there, but how much time are you investing in seeking those opportunities?
So I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that every side in media gets overly sensationalized. I think that, both sides are just like wrong.
Yes.
It takes the most extreme thing, uses the most extreme words, and then goes, everyone should be upset by that on both sides. And I mean, I personally don't pay attention at all
Yes.
to media, because it's created to evoke bad emotions in you so that you become addicted to
Yeah,
it.
it's a
And it's not
business.
good.
It's a business. I mean, media sells its news, and obviously, having empowering news is not what sells the
No.
most. Um,
Which is sad. Well, it's true.
yes. Yes.
It's
No,
human
no.
nature, it's
Yes.
human psychology. Right, you're doing amazing things. Let's go all the way back. How did this happen? What happens in your childhood to bring you to here?
Yes. So, yes,
Because it
it's
always
always
starts
linked,
there.
exactly. It's always linked to the childhood, and specifically in my track, it's very much like it's something that I can explain from the start. So I grew up in Morocco, and when you grew up in Morocco, you're blessed to be part of a certain social class that takes you to private school and be able to be exposed to a more privileged world. But at the same time, poverty is part of your life. I always say that in Europe, the poor person is a homeless that looks creepy and you don't speak to him or her. And so there is that divide. And in Morocco, that homeless is also the person that helps your dad like park like the car outside, is like very proactive. And then when we eat, we kind of like take a tray out to that homeless. Every day. That homeless is really integrated in our life. And so as a child, when you come out and you're playing like with your ball outside, you throw it like towards the homeless, and the homeless sends it back to you. And then for you, it becomes just that other adult in your life.
Wow.
That is really integrated like in your life. And then we also automatically give away the extra clothes that we have to the people that are working with us, to the homeless in the street. And so you have these two social classes that are like very much embedded. And as a child, you don't feel the difference between the two social classes. But then as you're growing up, you start feeling the disparities. And you've grown an empathy towards that social class, and you do want to help them. So in my case, it was really something that since the age of like 7, 8 years old, I always like wanted to help the poor people. And then it started with really understanding that I had a knowledge from my French private school that not everyone had. Not everyone speaks French in Morocco. They speak Arabic, and then the higher social class speaks French. So I'm like, oh, maybe I can teach French like to my nanny, to like the other kids that I meet, and so on. And then you realize that actually we all have something to teach, meaning like you don't need to have something material to give to others. There are other people that have less than you, and sometimes it's just like knowledge. And if you build that habit of transmitting, of giving to others what they don't have and what you might have, then it keeps growing in you. And then like as a teenager, I would just kind of like save money from like money that my allowance that my parents would give me. And then at some point you're like, okay, how much candy should I buy? Let me save a little bit, and then like buy some toys or whatsoever to kids in an orphanage. And it's that story that you just need to democratize the story of social impact. And it's not about, I am not gonna give this one bottle of water extra that I have, because if I give that, then I need to give like every day. So I'm gonna wait until I have 100 of them and then give them, because at the end of the day, that one bottle of water is meaningless. I'm not gonna change the world with it. And as I said, if I'm starting, then I cannot stop. And no, one extra bottle of water that you have, okay, and I'm talking about water because is probably the least expensive thing, but the most crucial thing, it really can save the life of someone that doesn't have it. So, and it's not because you can do it today and you cannot do it tomorrow that you're going to stop yourself today from doing it. So, yes, as a child, I did grow up that mindset. And then the United Nations was that big, like entity doing good in the world. It was that big brand at the time that I dreamt about being part of it. And then over time, as I grew up and I went to study, I actually did a hotel management school and then a business school. And then I started my entrepreneurial journey by bringing some American brands into Morocco and distributing them from 24 to 27. And then I kind of, when I was like more established in my business, I already had my 2 daughters, I just like re-questioned myself and I was like, whoa, like where is that big dream of working for the United Nations, the social impact part in my life? Where is it? I kind of like lost it throughout the years. And that's when at the age of 27, I made a decision that women make in their 40s. And like people usually, like make in their 30s, 40s, where they decide to completely, like revamp their life around, like their dream and passion. And at that time, I realized that people were doing it at some point in their life. And I just thought, let me save myself time, because like if I just keep building a life that is away from my childhood dream, which is to do social impact and to change the world, then I'll wake up one day completely being, like worn out and then having to start it all. So let me start it right at this stage in my life.
So again, it resonates so much with me just now, because this is all the stuff I'm working on in
Yes.
my own head. As I say, I've not got there yet. I'm still the business guy. I'm not doing much else, but it does make a lot of sense. Actually, one of the books I was reading the other day, your story about the water, it kind of made it make sense. So I'm not going to get this right, but I'll get it close to right. There was a guy walking along a beach and he saw a little girl down by the edge of the sea, and the tide was out, and there was all these starfish and they were all on the rocks and they needed to get back to the sea. And it was for miles and miles, thousands and thousands of starfish. And the girl was throwing starfish in one by one. The guy went up to her and said, what are you doing? Why are you throwing in the starfish? And she went, well, to get it back into the sea. And he went, but there's miles and miles of starfish and thousands of starfish. What are you going to do? You're not going to make a difference. And she turned to him, looked at him all confused and went, but I made a difference to that one. And that story that you give there kind of made that really sink in, that like, yeah, that makes so much sense.
And was that girl like a child?
Yeah, a young girl.
Yeah. So you see how, yes, I mean, it's a beautiful story and it's so right. And I can see, that adult coming with its rational mind.
That's me. That would be me.
Exactly. And that little girl who's just a child and, has definitely less knowledge than the adult. But at the same time, sometimes, that as we're building ourselves, we kind of like lose the hope from like a child who just believes and sees the positive side and sees the impact that you're doing versus what you cannot do. And that's beautiful. And that's really something that we have to keep. We have to keep in us, and you need to reconnect to that child. And if you have lost it in your life, and I see a lot of like people losing it, and they just achieve much less because they're always like putting so many barriers on. Yes, like, and what if I don't succeed, or what if I do this? Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough. So because it's not enough, then I'm not going to do anything. That is so wrong. That's so wrong. And whatever you can do that is good to yourself as well. I see some people also not going into, like a healthy lifestyle because they feel like, oh, they can't do it this month because, like they're, I don't know, they have some other like social commitments. And it's not, sometimes like I see myself over the summer, I wake up, I'm like working out, I'm, doing everything right in my morning. And then obviously, it turns out into like a party in the afternoon. It's holidays. But do I, like just stop doing, like that right thing in the morning because, in the afternoon, I'm going to turn, like into, a party. No, of course, obviously, that the good that you do in the morning is better than nothing, and it creates, like a balance. So it's the same with this world. We're all part of this world. We're all contributing. If you're walking in the street and you see that one like plastic on the street, and even if there are like many others, but if you can just take the time to take whatever you can take, then, but imagine if all of us are thinking like that.
Fixed overnight.
Exactly. We are in a world where poverty is more than 80%, and then the assets are in the hands of like 20% of the poverty. So if just every one of us was giving $1 per day back towards a cause, then it would be like $6, $7, $8 billion a day that would be redistributed properly.
And it's crazy when you think about it like that. And when you multiply that by a year, it's just phenomenal.
Totally.
Money.
Exactly.
So talk to me about the United Nations, because I've been so isolated in my life. I'm from the UK, Scotland. I've lived in the UAE for 5 years now. First world countries. I go on holiday to maybe some poorer countries, but I go to the nicest hotel.
Yes.
So I don't really see what actually happens in the world. What happens in the world?
And it's right. You don't see what happens in the world. And the thing is, even when you want to, like you're like, okay, I want to go to, I don't know, Kenya, but I don't want just to stay in the right hotels. I want to go and do social impact. It's not accessible. So it's not accessible that easily, and so when you work for the United Nations, it was such a blessing, because I got to be in Mozambique, Ethiopia, Mauritania, Senegal, Haiti on the field. And you get to live the culture in another level, because you're not a tourist. You're part of some programs that are destined to the poorest communities, because it was for the World Food Program. And you really get in like a month to completely grasp the culture much more than you would ever, like as a tourist that comes 10 times to that country, because you're dealing with the real people that share with you their culture, their country, their challenges, their opportunities. Because what's amazing is that in the poorest communities, these people have a strength to give you back. They have something. They have leaders within their communities. They have resilience. They have positivity. I remember when I started all this journey officially, it was in 2011. And the same thing, you hear the news and you hear like so much complaint and discontent, in these developed countries. And then you meet with these people that will host you like with chanting and dancing, while being the poorest communities. And there was a sense of happiness. There was a sense of community, that was lost sometimes in the Western world, where, it's like very individualist. Like you go to Paris or sometimes London, and you got like everyone is kind of like shouting to each other in the street and honking, and then you get to those places and it's sunny and colorful, and so then you realize, one thing is that really happiness is linked to community. Because if you're wealthy and you're isolated, you're not going to have that same sense of happiness than people who come into, like they live at like 6 people in a space, as small as this podcast room. I'm not revealing it, but all the podcast rooms in the world have to be small. And yes, so we need, it's a transmission. When you go there in the other parts of the world, you understand that we have something to give, but we also have a lot to receive. And yes, and that's the beauty of it. And of course, an institution like the United Nations gives you that opportunity to be on the fields on those programs. and then build the proper network to be able to do it with your own company and organization after.
Thank you. I'm learning so much here from
Yes,
this because I've just
thank
not
you.
experienced and understood these things. So you've got a lot of other stuff going on as well beyond what we've spoken about. What have we not spoken about so far?
So, yes, I'm an author of a book called Be Who You Want to Be a Leader. And I speak a lot across universities to the younger generation with it, but also to people in corporations. And why did I call that book Be Who You Want to Be? Because I think that the hardest part in like a success track is really to take the time to really figure out who do I want to be. And it shouldn't be based on, the TikTok that I saw of like this successful person. And I'm like, oh, I want to be that because they're successful, so I'm going to be successful, or not linked to the pressure and the social pressure that your parents can put on you. And they're like, oh, I want you to be this when you grow up. So, you're going to be that, because it's in reality, when you struggle in your path, it's when you're trying to build a life that is not really fitted with your personality. Yeah. It's not based on your strengths. It's not based on your real passion. And so challenges are out there, by the minute for everyone. But when you face challenges and you're facing it with the right, tools, which are, like your personality tools, and you're facing it with what really gives you that energy and that passion, that fuels you, then obviously you're much more resistant than someone who's kind of like an imposter in a track. So, hence, telling people to please follow that inner voice that tells you, okay, I am not in the right place. This is not for me. And this is something you can figure out from the age of 18, 19. As much as who you want to be is going to evolve, like what you want in life evolves, but what you don't want in life, I think is pretty much set at a certain time. That I don't want this in my life, then it's very clear. Make sure to not put yourself in that situation, and put yourself where you're better at it, and try to build a career around that. And then of course that evolves.
And I think that that's such a valuable point that I think everyone should apply, and so few people do. I think there's so many people that stick in the same job until they're 60, or the same course or whatever, and they never actually do what they want to do, and they spend their whole life looking at someone else going, I wish I could do that. Exactly. And not doing it.
Because it takes a piece of courage. It takes to be brave, to really voice out what you want to do and actually act on it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes definitely, salary at the end of the month, even small, gives a shortcut to, okay, this is what I need. But in reality, when you get yourself out of your comfort zone, that's when you build up. I once interviewed Grant Cardone. You know him?
So literally the last person that was on my last podcast also interviewed Grant Cardone.
Really? That's amazing.
It's not even released yet. It was recorded earlier on this week.
Okay.
What are you going to say about him?
No, so I interviewed him a couple of years ago when I was in the US on my podcast, Be a Leader. And he had gone through an experience of really getting on the street and try to build $1 million from nothing. And he only had $100 in his pocket.
Did he do a TV program on
yes,
that?
Yes, it was a TV program. I think it was called Millionaire Underdog. And he told me this story, which really stuck to my mind. And I think it's so true and so amazing. So the question is, okay, so he's with $100 and he's in a place where no one knows him and he needs, to start building. So what do you do with the $100? I'm asking you the question. So
you're asking me. I think something to do with learning. I don't think you go and buy something. Yes. I think you go and get a course, or you go and get something where you can get knowledge to go and do it.
Yeah. That's, a good answer, but I'll tell you what he answered, which is even more powerful. What he did is to give that $100 to a homeless. Because in reality, as long as you have the $100 in your pocket, you are not in that like survival mode. $100 is not enough, like to take you anywhere, but having it as a safety will make you like start like to think safe. It's like, how can I make $2, like on the $100? How can I? So it's really, I think I see a lot of people who want to transition into entrepreneurship, but they're keeping, like their job. And in reality, until the day like you decide to quit everything and to jump full time into being an entrepreneur, then you will, like your brain, your energy, your everything, like your survival mode will ignite, and you'll get to another level of the results that you're going to get.
Yeah, it's like burning the boats. So the person that I
Yes.
mentioned, Darius Saudi, who's on the podcast that will be released before this one, he literally said, I burnt my boats.
Yeah.
He came from the UK, so different kind of story, but same thing really. He came from the UK, he'd ran into some troubles in the UK and came here with £750. He lived in a maid room. He ate 2 donuts and drank 1 coffee a day. That was all, because he couldn't afford anything else. And he just went, I don't have another option but to succeed here. And now he's, multi-millionaire, massive following. He was actually at an event, first time I came across him, he was speaking at an event. And everyone started like chanting when he came out, thousands of people.
Really?
And I was like, how does everyone know this guy? And he's just come from absolutely nothing to burnt the boat. Well, he was initially a multi-millionaire in the UK, left everything, came with his £750 and then redid it again. So yeah, I can definitely understand the kind of burning the boats thing.
Yes, and in reality, that's the journey of life. The journey of life is to take yourself out of your comfort zone, and then to have a vision and then execute it and build something massive. And it's true that sometimes some people also, once they've created, they get to a certain level, they want also to like restart something else from scratch and redo it from scratch, because also the passion that you have, from building things from scratch is amazing. Yeah. And the thing is, the beauty of that process is that once you've done it once, then you get to like a level of confidence where like nothing can be taken off from you, because it's not something that was given to you, something that you built. And if that thing for a reason or another, a crisis, or sometimes you build physical assets and there is like a fire that can burn it, you always have to think that you can lose everything that you've built. And the question is, can I build it again? And yes, I can build it again. And then that's where it puts you to another level of, like confidence and success. When you feel that that process, and that process, you can take it and put it in a different country, put it in a different industry. The process is the same.
And I completely agree with this kind of problem of getting too comfortable, because I'm there right now and I'm finding it way harder to start new things now than I did 5 years ago when I had nothing, because now it's like, well, I could just not and I'll be fine. Whereas back then it's like, well, I have to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your own challenges. We spoke a lot about other people. What challenges have you faced personally?
What I have faced is definitely like a life of challenges. The number one was really to design what is it, that I want. And I know I wanted social impact. I know I wanted to be able to generate revenue out of it. I have also like a creative component in my personality. I have an intellectual component as well, that I wanted, like to have and embed. And the community piece, that for me, if I created, I don't know, like a social impact business that has, like the thought leadership, which is the intellectual, has the creative side as well, but doesn't have the community, I would have felt a bit isolated in the concept. And it's not about just creating programs for like women beneficiaries and then, like, okay, thank you, bye, I'm leaving, I've done the impact. When I'm talking about the community, is really like feeling that community is growing. Like whomever has been part of like one workshop, one program is part of this nurturing community as an addition and keeps enriching. So the number one challenge was like, okay, now what does it look like in reality? And for that, it took really years of exploration. And in these years of exploration, as I said, I was kind of like deconstructing it into like many pieces. And okay, this piece costs X and needs to find a sponsorship of, like X to pay for it. And this other piece, like this other amount, and this and this and this. So even though my vision was big, then I was like having it in different blocks, and then I was achieving like blocks by blocks. And then came the time where also, so this was 2011 to 2014. In 2014, I started like building the first version of what my social enterprise was. And then in 2017, I realized that some pieces of it were completely draining money and not. So we were generating revenues from like certain part of the business and then spending it on other parts. Like for instance, we had a magazine, like an online magazine, with like empowerment content and so on. And that magazine was absolutely not generating revenues. And I had like a full team on it and so on. And then I also had a collection of like clothes made in Morocco with some women that we were like empowering and like teaching them, the art, the skills of embroidery and so on. But then also these collections were like we were spending a lot of money into, like creating these collections because we were not producing them in China or whatsoever. And we really wanted to empower these women throughout the process. But then at the end, the pieces were costing like $500 to sell, and it was like too expensive when, you had a Zara or whatsoever that was selling the same piece, at maybe $40. So I had to stop certain pieces of the business. And that was also a challenge, because it's a failure. But you also need to understand to be okay with that part. And then understand, like, more capitalize on other pieces of the business. So then in 2017-18, I built Women Choice, which had the community, which had the B2B and the intellectual part.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah. And then on the creative side, which like I really have a creative side, I only left a hospitality business that I have in Morocco, where obviously there is the empowerment piece because everything is like consciously sourced and the people that are working there are, like trained and empowered, and we're like making families work with us. And that business could have been sustainable and started being sustainable business-wise. On top of it, it made sense because as I told you, I studied in a hotel management school, when I was 17, like randomly, because I liked that and I had never utilized it. So later on, when I was like 35, that's when I launched the hospitality business. And now what I have, like my day-to-day job is Women Choice. I do have the influencer part because I have like an audience of 3 million on my social media that I've grown over the past 15 years. Yes, by being very like public, I had like a lot of like magazine appearances, TV appearances and so on. And like staying consistent in also investing in PR to keep growing and giving visibility to what I was doing. So you told me like speak about your challenges. So definitely, I mean, the challenges is in like building this dream business with the vision, but also like very, very like a lot of agility in the details. And now I'm finding myself also like rethinking of launching like the Women Choice Mag as, like a media platform. And I'm kind of like scared of it because I already failed it the first time. So I don't want to stress the current business by like pouring money into something that, could drain the business. And so you keep learning. So I'll tell you something. I think as an entrepreneur, as long as you're just surviving throughout the years in like, if you've invested in like your passion project, okay, which will make you strong enough to really look at the positive versus, like even remembering the challenges because you're so passionate about your business. And as long as you're just like surviving and you're not completely shutting down like the full business, then you're succeeding.
Yeah.
You're succeeding because over the years and years and years, you get to a stage where you keep refining. And then, like, as they say, it takes 10 years to become an overnight sensation. So there is a time where you feel like, wow, things are getting much easier. Like, things are coming out our way. Our brand is being recognized. What used to take months, like to close a deal now takes weeks. Wow, like things are changing. There is a point where you get to that, but literally it took me 10 years to get there. So I don't feel that I'm still in it now. Like I really feel I deserve it. It's not a waste if you've invested these 10 years in really building up your passion. It is a waste if you didn't take the time and the courage to really understand what is it that you want to do for the rest of your life and who do you want to be. Yes, and that's it. So once you follow your passion, like every challenge, every error, every trial is something that you will learn from, that you will eventually like reuse later and leverage later to also like financially be more successful.
Yeah. So something that you said right at the start of all of that, that was like, yeah, that makes so much sense, is you designed your life. You used the word design. I designed my life.
Yes.
And I think that so few people in the world do that. But interestingly, so many people that I've spoke to on this podcast have said, I design my life, or I design this, or I design that. And it's just not vocabulary that other people use. And I just think that's such a good lesson.
Thank you. Yes. No, that's definitely, the sense of like designing, like crafting, like drawing your life, your map, your it's really something that I feel I've done, and really since the age of 15, even wanting to have my daughters, like at a young age, it's things that I wanted. But I'll tell you something, we hear a lot about manifestation, and so the story of manifestation is like, oh, just like manifest and it's going to happen. Okay. For me, manifestation is about, yes, figuring out what you want in life, but just like manifesting and writing it in a wall is not enough. Okay.
You need to act upon it.
Exactly. You need to act, and execution has like a lot of hard work process, and you need to be able to put the hard work. So, but the closest to designing is really this manifestation concept that we hear a lot about it. Yes, like try to understand what is it that you want to do and what are the steps, to get there.
Amazing. And yeah, I think that's a great place to end, because thank you for such a good podcast. I mean, I've learned so much.
Thank you.
I've had so many people on that have been similar to me, and, even the sports people, it's like, yeah, we're chasing this one goal. Whereas I feel like I've learned so much from you. So thank you very much for that. Nezha, where do people keep up to date with you?
So I'm very accessible on LinkedIn with my name, Nezha Alaoui, on Instagram as well. If you put Nezha Alaoui, you find me under Mayshad Women. So Mayshad is the names of Maysoon and Shadin, my two daughters, and that was my initial brand. So we have Mayshad Hospitality in Morocco. We have the Mayshad Foundation as well, which is a non-profit, and you have me as Mayshad Women. And actually, Women Choice used to be Mayshad Choice before, we turned it into Women Choice.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Nezha. It's been great.
Thank you.